button here so we can get started.
Great. Okay.
You're good to go.
Okay. So a little bit about Ottawa Riverkeeper. We work across jurisdictions. So the geographical area that we cover is actually both in Ontario and in Quebec. That means that we work in several municipalities in both provinces, and we do our best to work together with all the different types of government that are found all over the watershed. We are connected nationally and internationally thanks to the Riverkeeper Alliance. And we are completely independent, non-governmental, non-partisan. We are science-based. So like I mentioned, we have a science team at Ottawa Riverkeeper. We're very fortunate, and they help us try and focus our attention towards certain issues in the watershed. We are solution-oriented, and we try and work towards how we can get people motivated to get out there and care about the environment. And we work together as a team. We are semi on the small side, but we pack a big punch. So the Waterkeeper Alliance is internationally known, and it preserves and protects water bodies overall. It unites over 300 waterkeeper organizations and affiliates with 2.69 million square miles of watershed covered. It provides drinking water for over 690 million people. And all of the Waterkeeper Alliance organizations have the goal of drinkable, fishable, swimmable water everywhere. So a bit about our story. So we started in 2001, which means that we've been around for 22 years. We work with thousands of supporters, and we tend to be the go-to organization when it comes to water issues. We began as one part-time position, and we now are at 15 full-time positions. So we're really proud of the growth that we were able to do over the last 20 years. We even have some extra summer staff that come and help us out during the busiest months for us. So what is a watershed? The basic way that we explain it is kind of like a faucet. Any drop of water that hits any part of this geographical area will eventually make its way into the Ottawa River. So even if you're far up north in Quebec, that water droplet is going to make its way down to Ottawa and where we are now. The Ottawa River is the largest tributary to the St. Lawrence, and it's 1,270 kilometers long, a little bit over that. It has lots of dams within it, and it covers a really big space. So we always say that it's actually twice the size of Nova Scotia. Within this territory, we actually are sitting on the Algonquin territory and the Anishinaabe territory. So as you can see, it's almost directly linked to the watershed area, and we try and do our best to honor that through our work. So the boundaries of a watershed can be determined by elevation and peaks. There's topography that determines the direction of flow over land, through the ground, and in streams and on rivers. The area of land drains into the Ottawa River and its tributaries, one of them is like the Gatineau River, which is a massive tributary to the Ottawa River. As the water flows through the watershed, it can pick up different parts of pollution like chemicals, compounds, and particles from its surrounding, which is why it's important for us to not only look at the water in the Ottawa River and its immediate surroundings, but also look towards some of the land that goes above it and beyond it, so that we can see the type of human interactions and pieces that we contribute to. So this is just a few images of threats to our watershed that we keep an eye out for and that we continue to monitor throughout our work. So as you can see, there is just overall human interactions. A lot of housing and developments can cause next to the water. People tend to put docks in and to enjoy themselves recreationally, but it can have a major impact on the watershed as well as the animals that live within it. There are also industries and mudslides. This next picture shows like the loss of long roots, which causes more flooding. One of the major ones that we've been discussing lately are dams, which can cause different parts of the river to overflow or more shallow parts, depending on how the humans decide they want to use the dams, but it can also stop organisms and fish breeds from being able to swim throughout the river without being stopped. We also discussed sewage overflow, which ends up being a major concern for most people who like to go swimming in the Ottawa River. There are steps that are being put in place in order to stop or lower the amount of sewage overflow that happens in our area, but it still occurs. And then we really discuss plastic pollution as a major issue. It currently affects everyone, and microplastics especially have become a serious issue and something that people want to monitor very, very closely, because we don't know yet just the extent of how it can actually affect human beings, but also the aquatic life. So as you can see here, it kind of explains a little bit more of what we work on. We also are monitoring nuclear waste pollution. So there's a nuclear plant going in at Chalk River, and our scientists have been closely monitoring the development of that project. Shoreline development, like I said, it's a big one that humans contribute to. Personal homeowners, they want to build out their docks. They want to be able to make their riverside lawns look beautiful, but it actually has a huge impact on the animals that live in the water. We try to collaborate with as many different stakeholders as possible. We want everyone to be involved and to care about the health of our watershed. There are federal departments like the ECC and the DFO. There are 2 provincial governments with over 200 municipalities that we work with or try to. 11 Indigenous communities fall within our watershed, as well as conservation authorities and organizations in the watershed. We have some obstacles to our collaborations, which is limited information sharing. We find a lot of times different departments, different organizations don't necessarily share with each other. And so some may be lacking information that another one has, but they aren't quite able to make that connection. There isn't a management plan for the entire watershed. Because there's 2 provincial governments, we actually find that there's quite a few differences when it comes to both of their ideas of preservation of the organisms and animals that live within the area. So the Ottawa River acts as a major border for the Quebec and Ontario government. However, the river itself, the animals living inside of it don't actually see the difference. And so how one side of the watershed can have certain specific rules, the other one doesn't. And it can so it still affects the waterway, even if one of the provinces is taking a more restrictive approach. So we do research and we have citizen science at the Ottawa River. At the Ottawa Riverkeeper, we are very fortunate that we have volunteers that help our group of scientists collect data throughout the entire watershed, so we can perform more research with a limited amount of staff. We also have collaborated with Carleton University, the University of Guelph, and the Canadian Museum of Nature when it comes to certain research projects. We did a project on microplastics, eDNA studies of birds and fish diversity, as well as a project on the hickory nut mussel, which is an endangered species. We've also helped co-author 2 papers on microplastics, as well as the involvement of citizen scientists. We are doing our best to make sure that all this information is available widely, and we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to access the research that we do. Community-based monitoring is a big part of our organization, and it involves a whole lot of volunteers who give us their time and their attention, and who really, really care about the Ottawa River and the watershed. So they participate in Watershed Health Assessment and Monitoring Project, which puts together 14 indicators that help us monitor the health of the water. These 14 indicators are extremely important for us to be able to determine whether or not the watershed is doing well and the biodiversity within it is going to be able to survive. These are very active and passionate participants. And there's just a few things that they monitor, like ice on and off. So when the ice melts and where it's melting, invasive species monitoring, algae blooms monitoring and sampling. They do phosphorus monitoring, and they also do land use monitoring. There's many, many ways that they keep an eye out for us, and they always report back what they are observing in the watershed so that we can know better without even having to be there in person. So road salt monitoring is something that I am in charge of currently. I have a group of around 20 volunteers who are helping us test for road salts in our local streams and creeks. I have been overseeing this group of incredibly passionate volunteers. They use conductivity meters to test for road salts. And what it does is we see a direct correlation between chloride levels and conductivity measurements. And so we are able to draw from that how much of the road salts are actually making its way into the creeks. This can be incredibly harmful for the environment. So we are currently running an education campaign trying to get the public to reduce the amount of road salts that they're using. We monitor 20 sites in Ottawa and in Gatineau. The volunteers help us by testing the water, but they also collect water samples that we can send to the lab and make sure that our data is correct. Their data is relayed onto our science team, and through that, they can monitor each and every one of these sites throughout the entire season, and we can really try and start to pinpoint what time of the year it's worse. Over 80% of our samples test above the toxicity levels that aquatic organisms can actually survive in. So chloride makes it incredibly difficult for these water organisms to live within the waterways. And that really affects the biodiversity in our watershed. Small creeks and streams may seem unimportant when you look at the Ottawa River, which is large and vast and an amazing place, but these small streams and creeks end up being a haven for smaller organisms as well as animals and wildlife, and they are very important for the biodiversity in the entire watershed. So here you can see a map of our 2022 sites for monitoring chlorophyll, phosphorus, and you can see how many dots and how widespread it is. We're very fortunate that we have so many dedicated volunteers that allow us to track this many different locations. As you can see, it goes very far up there. And it really just allows our scientists to focus on the data rather than having to drive up to the farthest point of our watershed in order to collect data on a weekly basis. We are so fortunate for our volunteers, and we definitely can, as you can see, they help take a huge load of work off of our shoulders and allow us to really try and come up with constructive ideas. So this is about the Riverwatch Network. They are citizens who and stewardship groups. They provide expertise and local insights throughout the watershed. So we really look towards these individuals. If we are going to a location that we haven't been before, don't really know very well, they can drive us around in their boats maybe and bring us to different locations where they live, near where they live. They also participate in community-based monitoring initiatives, water quality monitoring. They will send our scientists email if they see anything that they think is out of place or weird. They participate in the ice on and off, and can even send us pictures if there's algae blooms. Now on to our endangered and invasive species. So there are a few species that we really highlight because their populations are declining. One of them is the American eel, which you see in this lovely photo. Because of human interference, the population has declined 99% in the last 20 years. This is generally speaking, this is associated with the amount of dams that we have in the Ottawa River watershed. So the eels actually travel from the ocean through the St. Lawrence and up into the Ottawa River. They like to swim back and forth depending on the breeding, They swim back and forth during the breeding season to lay their babies. And so when trying to pass through the hydroelectric dams, they again get caught up in the turbines and end up dying that way. We also are on the lookout for a lake sturgeon, which are the largest Canadian freshwater species. There are several factors that contribute to the decline in their population. One of them being one of their resources, the hickory nut mussel, which is endangered because of the zebra mussels that are found in the St. Lawrence River. And something that we really want to get out there is to make sure that people wash their boats when they change bodies of water, whether it's a kayak or a motorboat or a sailboat. You need to make sure that you're washing everything down to make so that you're not transferring over species that don't already exist in the other environment. Here are just some more pictures. So when it comes to the American eel, you can see this green structure. It's actually an eel ladder that can be installed at the hydroelectric dams. Eels will be able to squirm their way and climb their way up and around the dam. We are hoping to have these installed in the dams in our area. It will help with the migration and save their lives, and then that way they don't have to swim through the turbines. Next to that, you can see a hickory nut mussel, and just below it is a mussel covered in zebra mussels. As you can see, they completely just take over the organism and it is unable to properly feed itself. And then just next to that, you can actually see a life cycle when it comes to the hickory nut mussel and the lake sturgeon working together. They actually live very harmoniously in our watershed, and they use each other for nutrients and to move around. And so they're an integral part to the watershed, and they are an integral part to each other's survival. So now we're going to continue talking a little bit about our volunteers. This is the Youth Water Leaders Program. It's ages 17 to 25 and lasts about an 8-month period, but it's like 1 day a week kind of thing. Throughout that whole period, you will amass 120 hours where you can do volunteer projects and also educational projects. This last summer, the youth water leaders went and saw a turtle hatching, which was amazing to hear about. They've also were instructed on other scientific research that's happening along the Ottawa River, as well as did multiple different activities like this whitewater rafting excursion that they do. They look at problems within our watershed and identify solutions to those issues. They also design their own service projects which help towards their volunteer hours. And they develop skills like communication and outreach, problem solving, and science. And then this final section is how you can get involved. So there's lots of different ways to do it. The first one that I have here is joining a cleanup. Ottawa Riverkeeper organizes shoreline cleanups throughout the entire summer. Part of the spring and part of the fall as well, but it depends on the weather and how cold it's getting. We do shoreline cleanups throughout the Ottawa and Gatineau region. And we try to make it out there and further into the watershed, but if we're not always able. With these cleanups, we generally have around 30 volunteers that help us pick up garbage along the waterway. And we're actually able to keep hundreds and thousands of pounds of garbage out of the Ottawa River, which we're very proud of. You can also organize your own cleanup with iCleanup, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. You can use some of our services like Swim Guide. During the summer months, we have an intern, and she goes out and tests the water in the different beaches in the Ottawa River for E. coli levels. And then we update it to the website so that people know whether or not it's safe to go swimming at the various beaches within our region. You can volunteer with us. We have lots of different volunteer roles that need to be filled, like the citizen science roles I was talking about earlier. And the last one is just sign up for our newsletter. We post any volunteer jobs that we have in there. And it's also a really great way to just keep up to date with what's going on with Ottawa Riverkeeper. We love to share stories from our volunteers, and we keep people up to date with the different activities and events that may be going on. So I've added this here because I know lots of you are water enthusiasts. You can actually organize your own cleanups or just register anytime that you pick up garbage within the Ottawa River. We've actually had volunteers in the past that are avid kayakers, and they go out and they just bring a bag with them, and anytime they find garbage along their route, they pick it up and they bring it back to land. So if you go onto our website, icleanup.ca, you can sign up with a small account. All you need is an email and a password. Through that, you can register your cleanups, and over time, you'll see the weight, the total weight and the total trash bags gradually accumulate, and you get to see how much of an impact you've had over a large amount of time. And it's very fun to watch that number go up, and you really get to see, feel proud of the accomplishment that you've made. This is just a result of one of our studies, which is one of the questions that we asked people was, do you worry about the health of the Ottawa River? And 69% of the people responded saying often. I get a lot of questions when I'm doing outreach events about the water quality of the Ottawa River and whether or not people feel safe swimming in it, and just jumping right in. And we want people to know that the river is there to enjoy, but we also want to keep it that way. So the work that we're doing is incredibly important because we want future generations to be able to enjoy the river just as much as we are. If you want to help out, you can always call our pollution hotline. If you see something in the water that looks a little funky, or you're noticing that there's a lot of pollution in a certain area, you can call the hotline, or you can go online to our website and report any kind of dump that you see. It's also a great place to let us know about algae blooms. In the past, we've responded to concerns about oil spills, as well as other small pollution events. And we go in and do a little bit of research. We contact local authorities and we try to get answers back. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Renee. That was a great presentation, and we all appreciate clean water. So what you do is really valuable, and from everyone at the club, thanks for all the work that you do. I guess with this, we'll kind of turn it over to questions from everyone. So if you want to just raise your hand and James can have a look and call on you.
Can I suggest to Renee that you cease your screen sharing for a moment? Thank you. Then I can see everybody. Mark's got his hand up first. Go ahead, Mark. We're not hearing you.
Maybe Mark's having some technical difficulties.
You can type it into the chat as well. It looks like there's a question from Teresa. She said, is salt fatal to fish and other aquatic wildlife? So the answer is yes. When the salt dissolves into the water, it dissolves into chloride, and like part of it goes into chloride, and that chloride is what ends up being the harshest for our environment. It can actually stop the freshwater organisms' ability to manage water content. It can prevent them from growing, and it can also prevent them from respiring within the water. It's the main issue, and the reason why that we talk about it is because it's in the streams and creeks. So there is less water for the salt to dissolve in, and it causes really high concentrations. Overall, we're trying to get people to understand that, because obviously the Ottawa River is such a large body of water, and it has a very fast moving current. And so if there's one pocket of high concentration, it moves along very quickly, whereas the streams and creeks, that salt content can sit for a long time, and it really damages the organisms.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good. I got a brand new computer and a brand new microphone and a brand new camera, so getting everything together is a challenge. I've not joined any of the cleanup groups, but I'm known for a long time that my day pack always has a collection of different sized garbage bags. And I think some of the most horrendous disasters I've seen are on the Upper and Lower Duck Islands. Well, mostly Upper Duck Island, Kettle Island. You know, after just one party alone, I hauled out 2 construction-sized garbage bags that were heavy enough that I had to use 2 hands to lift it up. And you know, on a short trip, and I didn't even go all the way around Kettle Island one time, I ended up with 4 garbage bags of stuff. And that didn't even include things like the tires and seats and refrigerators.
Yes, this last summer we did a cleanup. Actually, October 1st, we did a cleanup at Kettle Island. We picked up over 700 pounds of garbage, and that was with the help of the NCC and a group of about 50 volunteers. We had the cadets let us borrow, well, they drove it, but they gave us a boat for the day. And that's the only way that we were actually able to carry the garbage off of the island, was using their boat. We were very fortunate for that, but we try to be aware about all those different potential hotspots for pollution. But if you see one or you know of one like that, iCleanup can be a way for us to monitor it. We do keep an eye out for people who bring back large amounts of garbage, but you can also just let us know. And I'm actually in charge of organizing shoreline cleanups. So if you send me an email of a spot that you know could use some extra attention, we are happy to organize a cleanup in the area and bring out many volunteers to help with that issue.
There's another question in the chat from Teresa about working with the city to lessen the amount of salt used. Before you try to answer that, I just want to add to the question slightly. Not just the city, but those who are responsible for large areas of pavement, shopping malls and the like. I was quite surprised this afternoon that a mall that I happened to visit had a truck going around with 2 workers, and they were dumping full pails of whatever they were using to melt the snow. And that begged for me 2 questions, because the parking lot was turning into a lake as opposed to a snowbank. Is there anything that can be used that is not harmful to the wildlife that melts the snow? And do we have any sense of what that might be, and how is that being used? Because clearly ice on the roads is a problem, and melting it with salt does work. Gritting it with sand works to a lesser extent. But I'm curious to know whether the Riverkeeper organization has taken a more holistic approach to not just trying to reduce salt, but to work with partners that might try and find alternatives.
Yes, so you guys actually have this presentation. We're in the middle of our road salt reduction week. So it's perfect timing to be discussing this. To first respond about the city. So we do speak with the city quite a bit about their environmental impacts, and we do try to collaborate with them as much as possible. The city of Ottawa is very conscious about the amount of salt that they use, but they sometimes have defective equipment, or there are certain areas that are getting too much salt, and it's just because some of their employees may not be aware of how much they should be putting down. But the city actually has a program called Smart About Salt, where homeowners, property managers, and property owners can learn more about how much salt they should be putting down, and they can actually get Smart About Salt certified if they want to. It's an amazing program, and we encourage as many people to go out and get it as possible. When it comes to alternatives, we don't really say that one is better than the other. For us, it's all about lessening the amount of salt that's being used. So most people just put down way too much, and kind of, as you were saying about the mall, they were just kind of dumping it. That's not what we want to see. We want it evenly spread out. If it gives you a better idea, we always talk about the fact that you only need 1 cup of road salt to cover a 2-car driveway. A massive 20-kilogram bag of salt should actually cover your driveway over 30 times. So you should be able, if you had to put salt down every single day of a month, you should be able to not have to, you should only be going through 1 bag itself and not having to be buying more. There are alternatives, and it's also about when you're using it. So road salts, as just in like the rock form, it actually is only conducive to weather up until -7. If the temperature drops below -7, that salt no longer works, and it won't actually end up melting your ice. It will actually combine with the ice and make things even slippier. So if you are looking to add grip to your driveway or pathways, we really suggest using grit or sand. It's exactly what they do in Winnipeg with their freezing cold winters. We just happen to have more mild winters in Ottawa, so salt does work for us for a few months of the year. But there are some alternatives, and there's also ways that you can make salt work a little bit better for you. You can actually create a brine, which works for colder temperatures, just dissolving salt in water. It's a little bit more complicated than that. I've never actually done it myself, but there is a way, and it works for colder temperatures, but you also end up using less that way. I've heard that beet juice is an organic alternative to salt. I don't know how that one works though, but apparently you can put it down and it helps. I personally think that it might make your driveway look a bit like a murder scene, but to each their own, I guess. And if you're looking for an organic alternative, then you can definitely do that. But overall, we just want people to extend their winter toolkit. So rather than only having salt in your garage, have a bag of sand or grit. Make sure to get out that shovel. You can always get an icebreaker out too. Try and diversify your winter toolkit. So then that way you're not always reaching for the salt for your driveway.
We have another question in the chat. This one asks, what kind of cooperation do you get from the Conservation Authority and its equivalent in La Province de Quebec?
So it's a bit of a mix. All of these more publicly funded organizations and branches of the government, they tend to have their own priorities as to what they'll be working on for a certain period. And if our priorities align, then we will happily work with them to try and move towards better solutions and the bettering of the environment. We share data with them and we also consult with them. So if our scientists can offer them help, or if they can offer help to our scientists, then we try and keep that dialogue open. The biggest differences that we see is in Ontario and Quebec, they have different standards for a species to be considered endangered or going extinct, and what those measures come into place when a species is labeled that way. So like I said earlier in the presentation, the American eel in Ontario is a protected species because, as you can see, if 90% of the 99% population decline in 20 years is pretty major for us. However, in Quebec, it is not a protected species, so they actually still have a fishery that fishes the American eel, even though we're seeing a major population decline. And so things just differ a lot, but we try our best to keep the lines of communication open. I can't speak directly exactly on what we work on with them. That generally comes more with our science team. The work that they're doing is far more exact and precise towards certain species and certain issues that we're facing. And they do their best to try and work with authorities that way.
Karina, you're next.
Oh, hi, thanks. Yeah, just along or in that vein, I guess. I was wondering what you could speak to, or if you could speak about the watershed or strategic plan or a watershed plan. There was a conference or symposium when Meredith Brown was Riverkeeper in the 2000s, and municipalities came together, multi-stakeholders, scientists, citizens, and so on. And that was all in vain to create a broader watershed plan and vision and a strategic plan. I'm wondering if you know what's happened with that work or where Riverkeeper is looking to go in that direction, and potentially to update the river report that was done in 2006. That was my first question anyway. Just wondering about that work. There's still direction or funding for some of that.
I'll be honest, I don't have an answer for you on that. It's not something that has been discussed while I've been around. I've certainly talked with the whole team about strategic planning, but generally speaking, at this point, we're very focused on our watershed health indicators, as well as making our case when it comes to the nuclear waste, the nuclear Chalk River plant. I could not tell you, I'm sorry. It's not something that's come up in our discussions in a while, but it's very possible that there's more just behind the scenes work that's going on, and that I just haven't been a part of those conversations.
Okay, no, thanks so much. And I was just thinking too, for citizen science or mobilizing and recruiting volunteers and whomever, I don't know how I could help reach out, but the Ottawa Field Naturalists, and Ecology Ottawa, working on water issues too. I know somehow, and I think the field naturalists must, people there with some time too who might be able to help and join in some way. Yeah, so I can chat about shout or send you a note sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. You can always send us an email. We're always looking for more ways to branch out and collaborate with existing organizations.
Okay, yeah, cool. I'll chat with you.
Thank you. Our next request for speaking is from somebody who's identified as L, but we don't have any more of a name than that. But L, if you'd like to unmute and go ahead.
Hi, thank you. That's a really interesting presentation, Renee. I just have a question. I'm wondering if you're able to talk a little bit more about the relationship that the Riverkeeper has with Indigenous communities in the watershed, and if there's any collaboration.
Yeah, so it generally ends up being our science team that works with the Indigenous groups and communities the most. A lot of time they'll be brought in for consultation or just overall conversations. We are very open to collaborating, working with hosting Indigenous groups, but a lot of the times it tends to be that they are doing their own thing. We are very much open to creating relationships and growing our relationships within the watershed with Indigenous groups. However, generally speaking, in the last few years, it's something that hasn't been a major part of our work, but we are hoping to expand that as the years come, as well as now that we will be actually moving, we will be moving to a location closer to the river. We hope for our office spaces to be a point of access for those groups to come in and learn more about the Ottawa River.
Thank you very much.
So perhaps if there are no more questions for the floor, I'll close it out with one question or a few parts kind of related to fishing. So I'm not sure how much the Ottawa River is kind of known for fishing, but how are the fish populations doing in the Ottawa River? From your knowledge of all the watershed, any suggestions for fishermen, fisher people who are doing sport fishing, and any advice on specifically for those who are interested in fishing, what steps they could do kind of help ensure a healthy fish population?
If you catch a lake sturgeon, put it back in the water. And if you see an eel, put it back in the water, please. Overall, I am not the biggest fisher. This is a question that would have been perfect for our education intern this last summer. The fish should be more than healthy enough to eat if that is something that you want to do. The Ottawa River water health is very good. We encourage everyone to use it, but don't abuse it is the overall goal. But just try and be aware of endangered species in the area and populations that may be on the lower end. As I said, the lake sturgeon, we want to keep an eye out for those and make sure that you're doing catch and release if you do end up catching one by accident. I don't have any more information on that. I am just not a big fishing person.
No, that's perfectly fine. And I think the risk of me catching a lake sturgeon is pretty low. So I don't think there's much issue there. Well, Renee, on behalf of the club and everyone here, I want to thank you very much for coming and giving the talk. It's great work that you do. And it's an excellent Q&A. So a round of applause from all of us. Thank you very much for coming.
And if there's any questions that I didn't answer completely or that you're still wondering about, feel free to email us and I can send it along to our scientists or to anyone on our team that I think will be able to offer you the most complete answer. We try to work together as much as possible, but I definitely don't have a science background. So when it comes to, and I also haven't only been around for about a year and a half. So I do encourage you all to send us an email if there was anything that I missed.
Renee, before you sign off and we stop the recording, can you give us that email address clearly?
Yeah, you can email us at info@ottawariverkeeper.ca. You can also just visit our website, and there's lots of different ways to contact us. If you go to our contact us page, there's emails for most of the people on our staff.
Thank you.
Great. And for everyone from the